Welcome to the Windy City Dress tutorial by Windy City Kid. Remember, if you have any questions, feel free to message me and I'll do my best to help you out. So before we get started going through the instruction packet, let's go through the materials you're going to need. You're going to want a nice pair of fabric shears. Don't use regular scissors or this will just get you frustrated. You're going to want a good amount of pins to pin your pattern to your fabric and to pin your pattern pieces together. I prefer small glass head pins, but any type of pin will work. You're going to need a tool to transfer your markings onto your pattern pieces. In this case, I have a blue pencil. You're going to need a small amount of heavyweight interfacing. This is going to stiffen your sleeve cuffs and your buttonholes on the back of your dress. You're going to need 7 or 8 fabric colored buttons. I prefer the Dritz brand, but any brand will work. You're going to need some of your main fabric and some of your lining fabric. Check the size chart for the correct yardage. And then you're going to want 1 spool of thread to match each of those fabrics. Lay out each of the pages end to end, not overlapping, and use the letters in the corners of each page to find which pages go together. Tape together each page inside the pattern line so that when you cut it out, the pages will stay taped together. Now cut along the dark black line for the corresponding size that you want. In this case, we're cutting out size 7. Use the size chart that came with the instruction packet. And if you're between sizes, go by whichever one is closest to your chest measurement, as this is usually the best fitting way to do it. So go ahead and cut out all of your pattern pieces along the black line for that size, and add any extra tape if you need to. Before you start cutting into your fabric, you're going to want to make sure that you've washed it in warm water to pre-shrink it. If you don't do this, your garment might get all misshapen after you wash it for the first time, because the fabric will shrink after you've sewed it together. Also be sure to iron out any large wrinkles before you lay out your pattern pieces on it. It doesn't need to be perfect, just so that just iron it enough so that all the pattern pieces will lay flat. Lay out your fabric on the floor completely open, with the cut edge on the side of you and the selvage edge facing you. Now lay out your pieces on your fabric, matching the suggested layout sheet, which has the vertical edge as the cut edge and the horizontal edge as the selvage edge. Also notice that the skirt part on the layout is tilted slightly from 90 degrees. This is so that it's on the correct bias part of the fabric so that the skirt hangs well once it's on the dress. The dotted lines of the skirt are showing where the skirt piece will be placed on the fold so that the pattern piece isn't 20 pages long. So I'm going to start by cutting the bodice front piece, which is in the top right of the suggested layout. I'm just going to lay it in the corner of my fabric and then cut all the way around it. I prefer to use a rotary cutter because I find it faster than shears, but either one will work. Next, I'll lay out the 2 cuffs and cut around each of those. And then I'm going to go to the bodice next. The bodice, you can see I want 2 of, so I can cut one and then flip it over and cut the other. But the easier way to do it is just to fold the fabric over in half, lay the bodice piece on top of it, and then cut around it just one time. This will give you 2 pieces that are a mirror image of each other. Then I'm going to follow the same fold process for the sleeve. I'm going to fold my fabric over at the middle and then place the sleeve on and cut around it one time to get 2 of the same piece. fabric that I have left, I'm going to make the skirt in 2 separate pieces, each one a half circle. So here I have laid out the pattern piece on here and cut all the way around it except for one of the long sides. Then I'm going to flip the pattern piece over and cut the other half of the side, again not cutting that middle line. So what I'll end up with is a half circle with a smaller circle cut out of the middle. Then I'll just adjust my fabric, take my first piece and lay it on the other half of the fabric, and cut the second piece exactly the same. The last piece I'm going to cut out of the main fabric is the placket piece, which I'm just going to use a scrap of the skirt area that was left over. Now I'm going to take my heavyweight interfacing and my H&I pattern pieces, and I'm going to cut 2 of each one of the heavyweight interfacing. So now we've cut every piece except for the bodice itself. For that one, we're going to take the bodice guide piece, the rectangle, and make all of the pin tucks before we cut the bodice piece out of that piece. So take your bodice guide piece and mark each dotted line with a pin on your main fabric. Then you're going to fold this piece over, right sides together, and press the seam flat. Then you're going to stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance along this edge. So this is the edge, pressed and then sewn. If we open it up, we can see we've got a nice clean line here. We're going to repeat that process on the other 5 pin tucks. Press and then stitch a 1/4 inch and then open and then press again. So now we've got all 6 of our pin tucks done. If you flip it over, you can see on the back that I like to press all of them to one side, and all of them from the other side I like to press to the other side. This just gives a nice clean finish when you flip it over. So now we're ready to cut our bodice piece out of this. If I lay it flat on here, I can cut all the way around it, or I can fold this piece in half and the bodice piece in half, line it up right on the fold, and cut around it once. Then when you open it up, you'll have your finished bodice piece cut. Now that we have all of our main fabric pieces cut, you can go ahead and use those pieces to cut them out of the lining as well. The only ones you need to cut out of the lining are the bodice